I would like to reconvene and welcome everyone back to the Davie County School Board of November 2nd, 2020. First item on our agenda is our invocation. Loving and gracious God, we thank you today for all your blessings, for the successful outcomes of our school events, and for all our staff members. Thank you for their willingness to serve our children and our community. We ask that you bless them abundantly, and we continue to seek your wisdom, guidance, courage, and strength. Be with us in our deliberations, and help us to be wise in the decisions we make for the good of all of those who have placed their trust and confidence in us. Give us insight to lead with integrity, that our decisions may reflect what is right and good. Keep us from short-sightedness and pettiness. Help us to make decisions that are for the good of all, and guard us from blind self-interest. At this time, we ask for special protection from the virus itself. We also ask for your help in showing respect and empathy for each other's situation when the world wants us to show the opposite, especially during this election season. Grant us the humility to always seek your will in all that we do and say. Amen. Next, if you will join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I miss our scouts. This is one more thing to the list. Next item is I'll ask for an approval for the minutes from the November 2nd regular meeting. Have a motion by Mr. Drexler. Have a second by Ms. Smith. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Next is important dates on the calendar. There's something about an election tomorrow. I tell you, the more I think about it, it does not matter what happens tomorrow. I think we're still going to be in a mess and need a lot of grace for each other. So I challenge myself, but challenge everyone that's listening to do that. Then we have November 5th through the 7th, North Carolina School Board Association Annual Conference. More information to come. And then we are back in here on December 1st. Hard to believe. Board of Education, then on the 7th, the Board of Commissioners meeting as well. And the only other thing I will point out to your attention is the board meetings of 2021. And there is one modification for November. The November meeting will actually be on the 2nd and not the 1st as it is listed, but just draw special attention. It's the first Tuesday of the month except for, looks like it's just April, which will be on the 13th. Next, I'll turn it over to Jeff Wallace for the superintendent report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, everyone, staff and guests that are viewing online. Thank you for attending with us. Well, we're moving into our 11th week of school, and as I've stated previously, I wasn't quite sure what to expect, and I sit here with very humbled but very thankful that we are where we are, thankful we're in school. I think you can see a lot of districts that are moving in that direction or hoping or wishing they could move in that direction. But I will tell you that although we're doing well, as you well know, we walk a tightrope, and it could change in a heartbeat. Our current situation as of today, excuse me, we have 2 active cases of active COVID cases among children. We have 2 active cases with staff, and we have 31 students that are quarantined and 2 staff members that are quarantined, which is significantly different from last week, which we're good, but we understand. I shared with you some of the reasons why those numbers were what they were. I also shared with you earlier today, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at that article yet, from the Wall Street Journal, and with the ABC Collaborative Science Group. That's the team that I meet with every 2 weeks. When I say meet with, we do a Zoom meeting. They're very informative, and their focus is specific with COVID and impact on schools, and they are advocating getting kids back in school, which I think you can see there. But I do want to make one note there that the article in the Wall Street Journal indicated that you need N95 mask, and they were quick to tell us that that was not what they recommended. But the staff there included that. So it's amazing, just that one small change. But they were pretty bold in the email to superintendents. So we did not say that. We recommend we feel these masks do what needs to be done. So, but anyway, it's an interesting article. Very fortunate to be at least privy to be an opportunity to be with that group, or to meet with that group every couple of weeks. So again, thankful for the numbers that we currently have. I want to specifically commend our building staff. Folks, I think I'd shared with some of you that, we have finished 9 weeks, and but there's some of our staff going at it to a point where it's really difficult to continue where they are. So I strongly encourage them to take time to relax, to balance. Ms. Haynes and I met today with the leadership team from a middle school, and I strongly encourage them that you've got to find some balance in the situation. And where they're not finding balance is their efforts to meet kids' needs. And the kids not doing what they feel like they should, and the balance of covering the curriculum and those things. So we're encouraging, but again, I want to commend them and ask that they try to find a way to be away and be with their families. And I understand, too, that the situation we're in is statewide, it's national, international, and it's not solely our responsibility, nor is it solely the teacher's responsibility to help raise that child. And we are running into some situations, and I'm not being disrespectful to parents, but they're asking us to do things that are not our responsibility. I mean, quite frankly, I said, ma'am, if you can't get your son to do his work at home, I can't get him to do it from here, nor can any teacher. Well, I don't like that answer. I'm sorry. He's in your home. You need to help us. Not the teacher's fault. So, teachers, staff, principals, thank you for all you do. You're doing a tremendous amount. November is a wonderful month, probably one of my favorite months, except for the leaves falling. If you've been by my house, you'll see why. But it is a time to be thankful. It's an election time month. And it's also a time that we celebrate our veterans, Colonel, specifically. And so I hope, again, tomorrow being election day, I hope you take the opportunity to vote, and I'm thankful that we have that opportunity. We live in a country where we can do that. I wish the best for the 3 incumbents that we have sitting here, and hopefully I feel confident in those, and just hopefully things will work out. I'm praying for each one of you and the entire board. Again, next week our country will honor the men and women that are serving and have served. And usually, as you well know, our schools do a really good job recognizing and honoring our veterans. And we can't do that necessarily this year. There are some that are reaching out, doing videos and different things to still recognize. But I think it's critical for our school system to continue that path, for our children to see. And I want our veterans to feel honored. I want them to know that this is important to us. So, but next week is obviously a time that we respect and appreciate all of our veterans, and hopefully next November we will be able to do something again face to face.
Excuse me, Jeff.
Yes, sir.
If you will.
Sure.
I got a call the other week about doing one again this year, and this year I said I've really got to think about that.
Yep.
And so I really thought about that, and I thought, this old guy, it's time for a break. But I truly amplify what you said about Davie County Schools does a good job of promoting the veterans. I have done many, many, many of those over the years, and I've witnessed the number of veterans that have come to those things. And I'm talking about young men, not just old people like me, but young men, which is gratifying to see.
Right.
So, I've really enjoyed that, but it's time I take a back seat and somebody else replace me.
Right.
So anyway, I just wanted to make that comment to you. Thank you.
And I will tell you, to your point, Colonel, and I've been in education over 27 years, and I don't know how many Friday nights are in those 27 years, Coach Absher, but still, when we honor our veterans at one of our football games and have the flag and then the theme song and then walking out, still a very solemn moment. So I hope we never forget that, and I'm thankful we can do that. That is good stuff. So, Colonel, thank you. Absolutely. Board, obviously thankful for each one of you, thankful for everyone listening tonight. And oftentimes we talk about making deposits and how when we're in the serving industry, and we need deposits. And so how do we find deposits? You go out and do something good for somebody. So, I challenge you, encourage you to find a time to reach out to someone else and do something good. So when you do that good, that's a deposit to you. So again, November is one of my favorite months in large part for those reasons, and the weather's cooling down. It's great. So athletics will start this week. We've got volleyball and cross country and swimming will start in a few other weeks. At the high school, middle school is they're getting started as well with similar sports. So we'll again commend our principals, Doyle, and our middle school and ADs and their coaching staffs. Again, we've had kids on our campuses since June, and we've done a really good job with that. Again, thankful for that. Thankful that we're getting started with athletics, and we'll just hopefully can continue to add more sports as the season, as those start dates roll along. I will tell you that, again, in meetings with superintendents across the state and in Piedmont area, we're continuing to push and share concerns about testing with the EOCs and EOGs, and some of my colleagues are start their testing in about 6-7 weeks because they end their semester sooner than we do. But there's still some real concerns about that. And Alan Duncan, as we mentioned earlier, did say that he feels like the federal government may be listening. Betsy DeVos, the Secretary of Education, did send a letter out to primarily the superintendents indicating that there would not be a waiver this year for EOCs or EOGs, not to expect one. But now that we've gone through the BOG, beginning the grade for third grade, and some districts are not even getting close to meeting the 95% attendance or participation number, and parents are saying, I'm not bringing my kid to that school. And they're again, over 50% of the school, or right at 50% of schools across the state are in Plan C still. So, Betsy, my understanding, there's at least some listening ears. So there may be a little bit of wiggle room with the testing. Not sure yet, but I just know that there's conversation. So we'll continue to share our concerns about that. All right. Last month, I had shared with you that anecdotally, I felt like there had been somewhat of an uptick in our enrollment, and we're up around between 8 and 10 students compared to where we were last month, so not a significant increase that I had necessarily anticipated, but that typically ebbs and flows with withdrawals. We are still floating around a little less than or right at 300 less now in attendance than we were last year at this time. And again, I've shared with some of you in our recent meetings about that's typical what we're seeing that across the state. Thousands of kids, particularly kindergartners, that did not enroll. Those numbers. So we'll see what that entails for us next year. Also, another positive decision that came out from the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the federal government was on October the 9th, the USDA did extend the flexibilities for the summer feeding program, which means they had originally gone to December, but now it's extended to June 30, which basically means our students can get a nutritious meal at no cost to them. So that really helps us from an economic standpoint, from our child nutrition or school nutrition program. So that was extended on October the 9th, and that's a very positive thing. Another good thing that last week, Ms. Horn and I thank you, Ms. Horn, for attending, but we went to Yadtail in Yadkin County, and they were awarded a $2.3 million grant with some other matching monies floating around a $3 million amount, and it's called a Reconnect Grant. And basically, they're targeting some rural areas for internet connectivity in our parts of Iredell, Yadkin County, and Davie County. So this, in part, when John Eller and I had shared some of this with you in the past, we're looking at some of our numbers, and Ms. Foyle, and some surveys that were done about the number of students in our community that are already connected to the internet. And we're pretty strong, 75, 80, somewhere 80% or so. So John Eller and I started talking about it with all this stuff and some of these grants coming out and matching dollars, typically being 50% match, now down to 20%. So he got some groups together, and we sat around the table with Yadtail and applied for some grants, and this is one of the first ones that they've received. There's some strong feelings that there will be others. What does that mean for us? Well, marketing, potentially could better, a much improved connectivity in Davie County. So that's was a good thing to go to. There was, we had a lot of representatives, Ted Budd, Julia Howard, Joyce Krovic, Steve Trotzler was there. There were some other commissioners, or not commissioners, well, there was commissioners there, but there were some other folks there from the government, General Assembly things as well. So the positive thing. All right, I have one, I need to stand up right here, or I'll just do this somewhat. Mr. Harris, if you would step over this way, please, or step in front of me. Stay 6 feet so I don't have to put my mask on. I want to commend Clay and his staff again. Each year, DPI does an audit or an examination, if you will, and take a look at and reward particular districts or different levels. But Mr. Harris and his team are recognized again for what they call for excellence in management by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and we received this certificate. So I want to commend Clay and your team. So great job. All right, Deanna, can you do a picture, because our agenda can. She's over there. So you want to stand right here? Good job. And let's do absolutely. Thank you.
I said your mother should have been here.
Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you and congratulations. Next, let's see, we got recognitions and way too many retirees, but I'll turn it over to Ms. Haynes.
No, you're fine. I'm electric. Good evening, Chairman Junker, board members, staff, and all of those watching from home. I hope we have some retirees watching from home. It is my honor tonight to acknowledge our retirees. And this feels late and it feels like too little, but I'll give you a little bit of background. During a typical year, as most of you all know, Davie County Schools and the Board of Education host a retirement dinner in May. And during that time, each retiree comes and they bring a special guest with them, and we acknowledge them and celebrate them with a dinner. We have some entertainment. The principals provide some personal comments about them, and we present them with their retirement gift. But COVID, unfortunately, has had an impact on our retiree celebration as well. So we have not been able to host a gathering for them at this point, and so we've been delaying, thinking we could do that in the fall, and then we've still not been able to do it this fall. But we wanted them to know that we have not forgotten them, and we certainly appreciate their years of service and their dedication and the positive impact that they've made. But in the last couple months, we've been surveying our retirees to learn their preferences on how we move forward, and how we celebrate them and acknowledge them going forward if COVID is willing. And so we will hope to invite them to our retirement dinner in the spring if COVID is willing. But we do want to pause and take the opportunity to acknowledge 21 retirees for their service and, again, the positive impact that these folks made through their work in Davie County Schools. So I do want to actually call them by name, even though they can't be here to receive a certificate. So I'm going to do this actually by school, even though they're listed on the screen in alphabetical order. So maybe you can match names with faces. This will be a little challenge for you. So from Coolamy Elementary School, we had 2 retirees, Carrie Blackwelder, top left, get you started, and Andrea Cranfield. It's hard for me to indicate where she is without actually counting. From Davie High School, we had 6 retirees, Sandra Boyette, John Bumgarner, Kathy Quartamash, Ann Davis, Kathy Smith, and Pat Whitaker. Mr. Nicholson, go ahead and start working on your speeches because you're going to have a lot to do, right? Moxville Elementary had 3 retirees, Mary Dyson, Cynthia Hersey, and Joe Ramsbotham. North Davie Middle School had 2 retirees, Cynthia Stevenson and Donna Whitney. The preschool had 1, Kathy Drum. Shady Grove had 1, Martha Rooney. South Davie had 1, Deborah Harwell. William R. Davie had 4, Gary Jones, Terry McDaniel, Angela Spillman, and Donna Thompson. And then Central Office had 1, Tammy Naylor. So as you see these folks, please thank them for their work, thank them for their dedication, and congratulate them. The ones that we have spoken with or emailed back and forth, especially under the COVID situation, they are pleased to be retired. So please congratulate them and thank them.
Congratulations, and it's not near enough just to read the names, as I've recognized quite a few up there, just the countless hours and years of dedication. Thank you very much. Next, we will have, I'll call on Mike Apsher and Dole Nicholson for recognition of North Carolina High School Association's State Coach of the Year.
It is my honor to recognize Angie Stage as the NCHSAA State Cheerleading Coach of the Year for the 2019-2020 school year, and is a candidate for the National Federation of High Schools National Coach of the Year. While being named the State Coach of the Year is an honor in itself, what is more impressive is that Ms. Stage has been named the State Coach of the Year 2 of the 3 times this award has been given, including receiving the inaugural award in 2018. Looking back at her 17-year coaching career, it does not take long to see why she is so deserving of this award. Her teams have accomplished so much, including 13 North Carolina Cheerleading Coaches Association championships. Last year, they received the highest scoring team award for the whole event. 9 NCHSAA State Cheerleading Championships. 2 Carolina Cup Awards for the highest overall average in all divisions at the NCHSAA State Championships. They have placed in the top 10 of the National High School Cheerleading Championships 11 times, including 2 National Runner-Up Awards. An impressive 8 World School Championships. Last year alone, her team had an overall record of 317 wins and only 6 losses. While these accomplishments are impressive, what is equally impressive is the reputation her teams have established across the country due to her leadership. At Nationals, her teams are known for their good sportsmanship and how well they conduct themselves off the mat. Many spectators make it a point to seek out the parents and the coaches to compliment them on their athletes' conduct at these events. This is a result of the expectations put in place by Coach Stage. As the cheerleaders know, they are representing Davie High 24/7. Congratulations again to Coach Stage for being named the NCHSAA State Coach of the Year.
Don't run off. Congratulations. It's amazing. I've been at a couple of places just recently, and they've asked where I was from, and you say Davie County, and you're used to hearing wrestling or football as far as the sports. And I've had two in the last 6 months. It's like cheerleading. I'm like, yes, that too. So it's awesome, and to have that much history, consistency, it's great. Next is our consent agenda, and I'll ask for a motion to approve our consent agenda. I have a motion by Ms. Horn. Second. I have a second by Colonel Hills. Any discussion, questions? Call for a motion, or call for a vote. All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Next business items, we'll turn it over to Mr. Spillman for HVAC replacement at Crenancer Elementary.
Good evening, Chairman Junker, Board, Superintendent Wallace, staff, and guests. In the budget year 2020-2021, the Board approved $700,000 in lottery funds to replace the rooftop units and ERVs on Crenancer Elementary School. Due to the age and the condition of all the rooftop units and makeup air units, staff contracted consulting engineering services to consult and write specifications to replace and install 3 makeup air units and 6 HVAC units. The project was advertised in the Davie County Schools, on the Davie County Schools website, the Winston-Salem Journal, and the Davie County Enterprise. Staff held a mandatory meeting on September 23rd, 2020 at 8 a.m. Professional Air Systems, Webb Heating and Air, Commercial Air Systems, and Associated Heating and Air Systems attended. Professional Air Systems, Associated Heating, and Commercial Air Systems all attended the bid opening. Bid opening was held at 121 South Davie Drive, Moxville, on October 7th at 2 p.m. All contractors submitted bids. Staff recommends contracting with Associated Heating and Air with 115 Elk Spur Street, Elkin, North Carolina, for the amount of $674,650, including $25,000 contingency allowance. Contractors originally bid $40,000 contingency allowance, but staff lowered the amount to stay in budget of $700,000. I know that was a mouthful, sorry.
Questions for Mr. Spillman?
Mr. Junker, I'll make a motion that we take that recommendation and vote yes.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Drexler. Do I have a second? Second. I have a second by Mr. Carroll. Any further discussion?
Just to make sure I understand, the 674, 650 includes 25,000 contingency,
Yes, sir.
but you're asking us for 700,000.
We have to pay design fees of $25,000.
We have what?
Design fees for $25,000.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good question, thank you. Any other questions? All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you for
Thank
all
you.
your work. Next, I will call on Mr. Harris for North Carolina Building Capital Fund Education Lottery Replacement, the ERV replacement, sorry.
This is a document that we have to approve from a board perspective. The school board's got to approve it, and it's got to go to the county commissioners for them to approve it. And so we would like to approve it tonight so it can go to the December meeting for them to approve it, and then we can send it on to DPI so that they can set the money aside for us because this is lottery funded. So that's what this is.
Gotcha. Any questions for Mr. Harris? Entertain a motion.
So
A
moved.
motion by Mr. Potts. Have a second by Mr. Drexler. Any other questions? All those in favor? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you, sir. Next, Ms. Wilson, do we have any public address to the board?
As you know, we have a procedure for public address during these COVID-affected meetings, and I'm sure we are following that procedure.
Thank you. Good to have you back. Next, I'll turn it over to Ms. Haynes for calendar update.
I think my message again tonight is delay. Normally, in the month of November, we begin our Davie County Schools Calendar Committee. And in that process, we have representatives, teachers, administrators, and parents who serve on that committee, and we work within that committee to develop a calendar that we feel like is best for our schools and for our community, but also staying within the parameters of the legislation that we have for the calendar. We typically bring 2 options to you in December to review. Then we put those options out to our staff to vote. And then I bring you the winning vote in January for final approval. As you probably remember, last year there was some calendar legislation that came out in May, and this relates back to Senate Bill 701, and it required some revisions of our calendar. So we redid our calendar last year, and I believe Lori Smith was on our calendar committee, so got to experience this multiple times. But that new calendar legislation was really in response to COVID and the school closures and concerns about the loss of instructional time. And so it established an earlier start date. It added 5 instructional days as well as 5 remote learning days for public school units to implement or practice our remote learning plan. At this point, we think that we will revert back to previous calendar legislation, but we are not clear about that. And so rather than convening a committee and potentially going through this process multiple times and potentially creating confusion and frustration, we're going to delay until folks return to Raleigh and we see if there's more calendar legislation to come. So just wanted you to know where we are with that and why there's a delay in the calendar committee this year. So I'll be glad to entertain questions that I may or may not be able to answer, but I'll try if you have them. Or I'll call on Jill to help me.
I have a question.
You guys can expect, we just gotta let things settle down before you go. If you put out a calendar now, there is a living soul who could rely on it at this time. Who knows?
Sure.
what next year will be.
Has there been any talk, though, of letting the local districts decide their calendar, the calendar flexibility? So we can start earlier possibly and have exams over by Christmas?
There is still support for that. I just don't know that that's going to be first priority this year. When I think about those who are truly advocating at the state level, it's certainly one of the priorities, and I've heard about that through some of the Personnel Association and NCASA. I just don't know where that's going to fall as far as the priorities after everyone returns to Raleigh. But certainly there's still pressure for local flexibility.
Sure, okay. That's good.
The House is definitely in favor and has been, and they have been in the past. If you recall, Ms. Howard, our representative, Julia Howard, did propose statute to allow us to align with the early college schedule, community college schedule, excuse me. So there is still some definite interest, and as Ms. Haynes has mentioned, the NCASA, the School Administration Association, that is one of their top 10 priorities, and has been, but we have to get it through the Senate, and we're hopeful, but continue to be hopeful.
Between the elections and COVID, it is really just too early to say what anything is going to be.
Okay. Thank you. Next, I'll call on Aaron Foyle with the accountability for 2020 graduate data.
Good evening, Chairman Junker, board members, Mr. Wallace, staff. It's good to be with you this evening, and I bring you a presentation that is very different than the presentations I've done in the past. Last year, the U.S. Department of Education did grant a waiver for all districts to not do spring testing. So what that did was it changed our accountability quite a bit, because now we have no data to go into that accountability model. So they waived those tests. They also waived the school performance grades that we typically do. So my presentation is different tonight. What we did have happen, though, is we had the class of 2020 graduate. They may have done it in a fashion that others had never done before, but we did have them graduate. So we're going to talk about some of their data tonight, because we do have their data. They did their stuff early on, and we're going to talk about that. So the first thing that we'll talk about tonight is the SAT scores. So all of the data that we talk about is about that graduating class. So it's not necessarily what kids did last year, but it's what they did during their high school career. So we'll talk about their SAT scores. Of course, the SAT is a college admissions exam. It's scored from a 400 to a 1600, and it has two subjects in it, the evidence-based reading and writing and math. So students in North Carolina choose to take the SAT, and they pay for it. So what that means is not every student in our graduating class took the SAT. In fact, just a little bit over a third of our graduating class took the SAT this past time. That's actually down from about 45% the year before. But again, as we go forward, and I'll talk about the ACT in just a minute, but we do require the ACT for all of our juniors. And as we go forward, I do think we'll continue to see the SAT decline, because the ACT we provide for all of our students. And so they can use that as their college admissions exam. So right after the SAT, we'll look at our ACT, again, another college admissions exam that we do require all of our students to take. They take that during their junior year. That means about 100% of our students take the ACT, which means that the scoring is a little bit more complete and whole than when you look at our SAT scores. The ACT has 4 subjects: English, reading, math, and science, as well as a writing portion that we have done for the past several years. Just as a side note, we will no longer have writing starting this year. So the DPI, I think, decided it's an added expense, not necessary for college admissions, so they'll be cutting the writing piece out of that. The highest score on an ACT that you can make is a 36. Then we'll talk about our CGR, which is a cohort graduation rate. That is the rate that we look at that's typically included in our accountability model when we have one. And just a reminder that our cohort graduation rate does look at all students that have been with us at all. If they enroll with us at any point during their high school career, they're included in that cohort graduation rate. So it's not just those that start with us, it's those that come in at any point in time. If they leave and they go to another valid educational institution, they're kind of taken out of the mix. But any student who doesn't graduate in 4 years or who leaves us not to another educational institution would be counted against us in our cohort graduation rate. So let's look at our SAT scores first. This is looking at all public school students. So it is comparing apples to apples. SAT does publish numbers that are just public school students. I did put 3 years up here, so you'll see 2017-18 all the way through 2019-20. The green bar is your national numbers. The blue bar is your state numbers. And of course, the orange bar is our Davie County Schools district numbers. You will see here that we do average higher than both the national and the state average. There are some states that do require the SAT, just like we require the ACT. So there are some places that it's more prevalent, people take it more. And so there are some places where it is kind of a whole picture, but not here. So again, these are just students typically that are already going to college and want to take the SAT to bump up their chances to get into college or just to have a better score for scholarships. So that's really what we look at here. You can see that we dropped slightly in 18-19 from the previous year, but we stayed steady in 2019-20, where both state and national dropped slightly from year to year from 2017-18 all the way to 2019-20. I will say that, just a note, it's not expected that COVID had any impact on any of the scores that I'm going to share with you tonight, because most kids who graduated this past year would have taken this their junior year. So just to keep that in your mind, everything it seems that we talk about now is colored by that, but these really wouldn't be. So I just wanted to point that out. All right, next we look at ACT scores, and like I said before, this is kind of a fuller picture of how our students score. You'll see that I have 4 different bars up there for the same 3 years this time. The green bar is still a national. Now we have 2 state bars. The reason that I did this is because ACT doesn't provide national public school only scores. So they don't provide an average of everybody that's in public school. This is anybody who takes ACT, whether they're in public school, homeschool, private school. So those are the national numbers that you see there. And again, it is self-selected in many places. So you would expect those scores to be higher than you would where somebody had to take them all the time. The next one is the state number. That's all the students in North Carolina that took it. So that's private, public, homeschool. Anybody that took the ACT is in that blue bar. Then you get to the red bar that's next. This is our public school students. So that's actually what you would compare our district numbers to, would be that red bar. But I just kind of wanted to include them all to give you a fuller picture of what those are. So you see 2017-18, 18-19, and 19-20. You'll see that there's a drop actually all the way across the board in each year. A slight drop. It's not really all that significant, but there is a drop from year to year. In our district, we have seen a decline in our ACT scores. We have a 19.6 in 2017-18, a 19.2 in 18-19, and 18.7 in the 19-20. So we did actually give the ACT this past year. Again, this is our seniors that graduated last year. So these are not the scores necessarily that our students took last year. They didn't earn these last year. They earned them in previous years. So this past year, we were able to give the ACT prior to closing down and leaving school. So we were able to do that. So we should have good scores this coming year for our graduates. We were also actually able to give an ACT makeup this fall. So we had about 10 students who took the original one, and then the makeup actually didn't happen because that fell after March 16th. So we had those students actually come in and make up their ACTs, so those students will have their scores included also. We're still on track to give the ACT in the spring for our current juniors. So when you look at these here, you do see the decreases in average kind of all the way across the board. There's not a great explanation for this. I've looked at some different pieces of data and looked at different kind of correlations between things, and there's not. ACT has, again, the 4 different subjects. So some of these things are covered very early on in a student's high school career, and unless there's some type of review prior to the ACT, they may not do as well as they would have otherwise. So the next thing I wanted to look at is our 4-year cohort graduation rate. The state actually does 2 different cohort graduation rates. We'll look at both. But the 4-year is the official one. So that's the one that's included in our accountability model. I put lots of numbers up here, 9 years worth. The numbers aren't super important, but I did want you to see the numbers to point out that we were really static in 15, 16, all the way through 17, 18. You'll see that Davie County Schools, we were at 87.3 all 3 of those years. We had a little drop in 2018-19, but in 2019-20, this past year, we actually recorded the highest cohort graduation rate 4-year that we have ever recorded. So we jumped back up right past that kind of bar we had been at, and so that was one of the highest, or that was the highest that we had ever recorded before. Since 2013-14, we got to 87.6, but we got up to that 87.7. So here's a line graph that kind of shows the state, again with that blue bar, and Davie County Schools with the orange bar. You can see our trend lines are very similar. As we look at this data here, you can see a little drop down below, which would be that drop in 18-19, and then now we're just slightly above the state average. We also have the 5-year cohort graduation rate. I like to bring this one up simply because it's not counted in our accountability model, but I like to see it go up. Because what that says is if you had a student that didn't graduate in 4 years, if your 5-year rate is still going up, that means we're still working with those kids and we're still getting them to graduate, which is the point. Whether it happens in 4 years or it happens in 5 years, we want those students to graduate. So our 4-year CGR last year was at 85.7, and so you can see in 1920 that it went up to that 87.8. So we did have several more students graduate in 1920 to put that 5-year cohort graduation up. Again, here is the trend line for that 5-year cohort graduation rate, and you can see again very similar to the state, and we're actually right where the state is in the last several years. You'll see, of course, that our district lines kind of bump up and down a whole lot more than the states do. That's because of our sample size. Because we're smaller, we tend to feel the effects a little bit more, and you just see things go up and down more than you do with a larger sample size that the state has. So that does conclude my 1920 accountability report. Do any of you have any questions? Yes, sir.
Ms. Full, how many students does the 4-year cohort include, and how many students does the 5-year cohort?
They're exactly the same. So I can't tell you the exact number for this particular cohort, but the cohort itself usually runs between 500 and 600 students, because those are the students that are coming in and out of our high schools all the way through their high school career. But it's actually exactly the same from the 2018-19 cohort has the same number of students as the 1925 year. Does that make sense? So the 4-year cohort in 2018-19, those are the students that graduated in 4 years. It looks at that same group of students in 1920 to see how many more graduate. So this year in 1920, we had a 4-year, and then next year in 2021, we'll look at the 5-year cohort graduation rate with these exact same kids. And so we just kind of build on what we've done already. So that group graduates in 4 years, and then after 5 years, we look to see who in that same group. So right now, our 4-year and our 5-year are not the same group of kids, but they lag from each other off 1 year. But our cohort typically has anywhere from 500 to 600 in it. And then some kids are taken out because they transferred to another educational institution. And we usually end up with, I don't know, around between 4 and 450. To actually look at to see who graduated.
Ms. Foyle, what's the percentage of juniors that take our ACT? We're up around the 95, 6, 7, 8%, right?
Yes, we are required by our accountability model to test at least 95%.
Okay.
And so last year, I think we tested 96%.
Thank you. And again, to remind everyone, not all states require the ACT, just like the other side of that, some states require the SAT. So when you look at, you compare the ACT with other states, that's just a select group, not ours in North Carolina is every junior. And there are unfortunately, some juniors that take the test that could care less about the test. And that's factored in. Ms. Foyle, what is the score that's considered successful in college? Is it 17, comprehensive score?
Well, it's different for every subject.
But isn't there one comprehensive score?
Well, we do have, yes, 17 is what they would consider like the benchmark for our ACT in the accountability
Right,
model.
and ours
Yes.
was 18 point, what was it, 18.7?
18.7.
Okay.
I got a comment, though. One of the great things about North Carolina, because we're requiring the ACT, is all kids get an opportunity to take it. and not necessarily today, but next year or the year after, they may pursue college because they're a little bit wiser as they got older, hopefully. And so there's already something in their hands that says, this is what I did at that point, and I'm eligible, I'm qualified, and so I'm going, without having to go back and take a test that they've never taken before. So that is really a good thing. Question with that. The state of North Carolina is paying for that, correct? How much does it roughly cost the state to administer that test or to pay for that test for all the kids in North Carolina? Anybody have a figure?
No, I could probably look that figure up, but I do not know that off the top of my
Yeah,
head.
a lot of money though.
Oh, I'd say
That's
so because I'm sure
correct,
it's.
a lot of money.
A lot of money, no doubt in my mind.
That's why we go back and forth with the purse strings control not directly control the questions, but they control a lot of the testing that's required.
Why were we, I think the number was 95% that tested. Why were we 95%? Is that because of absenteeism?
Yes.
And no makeup? Is there makeup offered?
So ACT is actually very controlling with the way that they give their test. So we have one day that we can give the test. As soon as that day is over, we have to mail that test back. They send us a different test to give on our makeup day. So we get one day to give it and one makeup day. Those are not secrets. Our students know exactly when those days are. And so if a student really does not want to take that test, they will be absent both days.
But if you didn't do that, they could be cheaters too.
Yes, yes. And it's different than, say, our EOCs are part of a student's final grade. And so there is incentive for students to take those tests, whereas ACT, that is not the case. And so you're just going to have some students, if they simply really don't want to take it, they just know not to show up. Correct. I know, and I really liked your comment, because one thing I've always thought is that if a student took the ACT and never considered themselves college material, and then they get that score back, it might really encourage some kids to go. Yeah.
Thank you.
I did also want to mention, and Mr. Wallace did mention some in his superintendent's report, what this year is going to look like. We do have EOCs and EOGs that are being required to be taken in the building. We have already done this with our beginning of grade 3 test. We are very fortunate here to be where we are, to be out of the 404 students, I think, that were supposed to take the BOG3, we only had 9 that did not. And so that's about 98% of our third graders actually came in. So that makes me feel really good. If we're at the same place we are now, of course, nobody knows what the future holds, but if we're at the same place we are now, it makes me feel very good about where we'll be with our participation when it comes to EOC and EOG, even with our virtual students. So we did make accommodations for those virtual students. They did come in on Wednesdays when there weren't other students in the buildings, and we were able to get them to come in and take their BOG3. Now that we are a one-to-one district in our middle and high schools, we'll be doing all of our testing online. In middle schools, we've been doing it online. In our high schools for years and years. So since I've been here, we've been doing that. So that will be the case there. We know that the missing data in 1920 will have an impact on our accountability model for this year. So for 2021, there are what we call long-term goals that go up over time. And so, of course, the North Carolina Department of Instruction is considering different things to do to our plan to submit to the federal government. They'll be submitting either an addendum or, let's see, or they can do an addendum or they can do a waiver, or there's one other thing that they can put in, but it all depends, it's all wording. It's all exactly what you're changing as to what they have to put in. But they will be putting in some things because obviously our accountability model has to change. It's just simply not going to be able to continue on the way it's been. So they'll be doing those. Those are due by February 1st. They did also let us know in a webinar on Friday that they are submitting a waiver for the 95% participation, but no one knows if that will be actually granted or not. So I wanted to give you a couple updates on what's coming up this year. Are there any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
A lot of hard work. Next, quarterly financial update. Mr. Harris?
Just easier if I go from here, so. All right, we'll talk about, this is a finance update for the first 3 months of the 2020-2021 school year. So this is July through September. We'll look at revenue and expenses. As we take a look at it, you'll see that our revenue continues to exceed our expenses, which is exactly where we want to be. And so when you look down through kind of where we are, you'll see school nutrition is actually positive this year. They typically, through probably December, they're in the hole because of the way it gets reimbursed. Mr. Wallace talked about the extension of the reimbursement rate, and that drives a big part of that. So that's the benefit that he was talking about in the school nutrition program, and that benefit rate going through June the 30th of next year. So we've even seen that in the first quarter of this year. Okay. And the reason that becomes so beneficial for us is because the school nutrition program is an enterprise fund, and so they need to fund themselves. And so if they fall short, the district's got to help them out. We don't have to do that at any point, or we hope to not have to do it at any point in the school year. And that's very promising for us this year that we've started out at that point. So we take a look at category. Overall, our personnel spending has remained at a constant 84%. We've talked about that over the last year, that really 84 to 87% is where we are with personnel spending. We stayed consistent with that this quarter, at 84%. Another 12% was really around maintaining our facilities, and the last 4% is devoted to our staff and student development when we take a look at categories, all in areas where we want to be and kind of how we trend. When we take a look at funds, state funding, this is the fund that is really devoted to our personnel, salary and benefits. And so that's remained consistent in this first quarter at 95%. And that's exactly where we should be when we look at this. State funding is set up for that purpose. And so we trend there from that standpoint. When you take a look at our local current expense, that's really devoted to staffing expenses that state and federal do not cover, and maintaining our facilities is really where that money is slated to be used. So when you look at it, 64% of our spending is focused on personnel, and the remaining 36% or so is around school operations and building maintenance. Just as a side note, COVID, in the first quarter of this year, COVID expenses have been about $78,000 to $80,000. That's when you look at sanitizers and the foggers that we purchased and everything else, things that are directly related to that. This quarter have been right at $80,000.
Excuse me, Clay, let me ask you a question if I can. So with regard to that $80,000, is that part of something that we will be reimbursed for from the federal government or state, or is it just coming out of Hyde?
We will send all that information to through the FEMA reimbursement program and hope to be reimbursed. You've probably dealt with FEMA in the past. That's a slow process.
It is.
But we continue to send those expenditures to them to see if we can be reimbursed for those and find out what of it we can get.
Okay, and on a couple of slides back, I saw under food, there was a zero. Are
here-
we showing that zero wherever it is now, or blank? Are we showing that because we're not being charged for it, the money is being provided, or are we spending?
This, on the state side of this, what I did was I just used the same format we've used over last year.
Okay.
And so last year, we had money in the food category from a state perspective. This year, we're just not spending any money in that category yet.
Okay.
And so instead of adding and deleting, I just
Yeah.
kind of kept the same format so we could work through that. We just spent no money in that food category.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions? When we take a look at federal, 78% of our federal spending has been related to personnel, and another 12% is directed towards school operations. And then there's 10% that's been directed to staff development. And part of that staff development has to do with teaching, working with our instructional staff to figure out how to teach in a remote situation. We spent a lot of time with some contract services for them to come in and help. So that's what that 10% is really related to, that, developing our teachers to be able to operate in this new environment. Questions?
Training effort for that you just spoke of, that effort, a whole lot of effort was taken up during this past quarter, but it's going to continue, right?
It will continue.
It'll continue at the same rate that it has been already, or less or more?
I think it's going to stay consistent. Jen may be able to talk.
I would say that we did a tremendous amount of training over the summer and the beginning of the school year. I don't know that it will continue at the same rate, but we'll definitely offer some PD each quarter. But I would say probably the majority of, for this school year, did go into the first quarter.
Right. We take a look at capital outlay. Capital outlay is really focused primarily on our building maintenance and facility repairs, with 75% of our spending in that category. We really utilize this for the big dollar work, such as, I think we'll talk about the well here in a little bit. We spent some time talking about the ERV at Cornatzer, those type of things. But we do have some maintenance that happens inside of this as well. If you'll notice, under school operations, there's a credit. I'll go ahead and answer that. We had done some work at South Davie Middle School in the pod, and bought some product from Amazon for that. It takes a while to get credits back from them. We had returned some product. We spent the money last year. We got the credit this year. That's the reason we're sitting in a credit balance there from that standpoint. If you take a look at the other category, $56,000 in other, that's 2 lease payments that we pay on the front end, Synovia and our activity bus lease. And so that's the reason that money is there when you look at other, if you should ask that question. And that will be consistent, you'll see that, but we pay those at the beginning of every year because that's when our contract says the payments are due. Any questions? School nutrition. Again, school nutrition, we're in the positive this year. A lot to do with the reimbursement rate and management of our food orders and personnel. The 2 key drivers in this are personnel and food, and they make about 88% of our spending this year. And that's the 2 things we need to be focused on in that area. There's some additional spending around repairing some equipment that we had, a few purchases, and that makes up the balance of what they've spent this year. The last category is special revenue. Take a look at special revenue. This is a very targeted, specific population of money. We get it for a specific purpose. And so with that said, 84% of that spending is based on personnel, and then staff and student support make up another 15% in that environment. The credit in the contracted services line has to do with our summer jump start program. We paid for that last year to go ahead and get it paid. And when we got to this year, we could actually move that expense to part of the CARES Act funding that we had for that. So that's the reason you see the $37,000 credit in that line. It was I think it was about $82,000 that we were able to recoup from the CARES Act money this year. So that's the reason for the credit in that line. All things said, I'm very comfortable with where we are. Spending has been right on track with where we wanted it to be. Revenue has trended exactly where we thought it should so far this year. I feel very comfortable with where we're headed and how we're doing right now. From that perspective, we continue to look at our CARES Act funding and where we can spend the money appropriately. We've talked a lot about the strings attached to that money. We continue to review that and spend the money appropriately where we can. For example, the computer equipment, everything that we talked about last year, that invoice comes due in the next few weeks. So, I mean, that's about $1 million that we'll spend in the next week or so through CARES Act, through capital outlay, through local spending. And so we continue to take a look at that and move what money we can to those funds and use them appropriately to kind of safeguard our local spending as much as we can. Any questions?
I have a comment, just the thing with COVID, where are we right now? You've heard Clay say we're in good shape. And we should be in good shape. We've not done anything drastic other than spend $1 million on computers, which we needed to do. But how long will this last? How long will our temperature check devices work? Will the state refund those? We're already having trouble with some. And we've only been using them for 10 weeks, 11 weeks. PPE. How long will that? We got our installment. Will there be more? We don't know if there will be more. Currently, Clay and Mr. Miller are looking at the additional, or looking at the savings that we've accrued or incurred with limited bus routes in the first quarter. Mr. Miller and I are working together to look at, now that we've gone, K-5 is on Plan A 4 days a week. I know today, as of today, we've had about 600 miles a week, but I need to know what that looks like from last year. So we're taking a look at the fine-tooth stuff, or really look at digging in. My concern is, how much longer will this go on? The other part that concerns me is that we are using old devices for one-to-one for our younger grades, 3rd through 5th, primarily 2nd through 5th, right, Eddie? And some of those devices, and if those kids are taking them back and forth home, they're going to continue to be damaged. Now again, the devices that are in the hands of the 6 through 12 are under warranty. The others are not. So we will most likely have to make another purchase of devices. We're trying not to, because we will not continue with the one-to-one with grades 5 down to 2nd. No, it'll just be 6 through 12 moving forward. Correct. Correct. And I failed to mention to you earlier, but we were able to use, when we missed the day due to weather, and then on Friday, if you recall, we had to close, as I reported out to you on Friday, we had to close down north, and the high school, they finally got power Saturday evening. But we were able to do that because of the one-to-one device.
The new snow. I mean, that's the bottom line. There's no such thing as snow.
Right, and so, but as I said, I don't want to repeat all I said to you Friday, we just need to be sensitive to that. But we're in a new territory, so we are in good shape. We feel good about the savings, but how long will we be in this situation? And understand too, that school nutrition is in the black 2 to 3 months earlier, which is great, but that money can only be spent in school nutrition. We cannot tap into that for anything. It's an enterprise. So just keep that in mind as we continue to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Anything I didn't cover?
Nope. I think we're good.
Any other questions?
I got a comment. And you're exactly right. You know, I was having a conversation with my wife yesterday, and I said, you know, we were talking about something coming up down the road, and I said, we might very well be in the same condition that we're in now, if not worse, 12 months from now. We don't know. Nobody knows. So we've just got to, from a school standpoint, we've just got to be as frugal as we can be and keep hoping for better. And that's all we can really do.
I'll add one more thought to that. If you take a look at the article from the Wall Street Journal today from the Duke Collaboration Group team, and France and other places across the country are seeing a significant spike. They're closing down areas but keeping kids in school.
Yeah.
So with that, so you think, well, that correlates with you got to have much more safety equipment. Because we're going to keep kids in school, we're going to have to make sure they're safe. So just, you try to forecast out, and those are good pieces to look at. That's a good point.
Thank you, sir. Save the best for last, Mr. Spillman. Davie County High School North Davie Well Project update.
Chairman Junker, Board, Superintendent Wallace, staff, guests. I'm back up here again. I wanted to give a slight update on the North Davie and Davie High School well project that we've been working on for a couple of years. If you ride behind the stadium back there, you will see a big 10,000-gallon black tank and a electrical service and a few more things sitting around. Well, equipment right now because we're right in the middle of digging our second line. But the first well we dug was out of the 2019-20 budget year. And we dug the first well on the Davie County High side. It had like 58 gallons per minute, which we needed 80 gallons per minute to do our zones with the well. That's why the 10,000-gallon tank's there with a secondary pump. Well, we got that done. We got it going, but we planned enough in advance. Our electrical service is big enough for 2 wells because we and our long-range plan was to get North Davie and Davie High School on the same. Let's see here. That's in the wrong. Well, no, that's good. So so that's our electrical service and some pre-construction stuff. And we're, like I said, we're right in the middle of it right now. And so, but what we've been able to do is when we dug the second well this year out of this year's budget, we got 200 gallons per minute. So that was plenty enough. I wish we'd have got it first, but you know, that's the way it goes. But with that said, what we're going to end up doing is combining the two to where we can feed both schools with the same amount of water. I mean, you know, with the same water, and to make it in simple terms with that. And so as you can see, that's just some pre-construction concrete and stuff for the tank and different things. We've been able to install all electronic controls for all the sprinkler heads. With combining the 2 schools, we've got to know what each school is doing at the same time, so we can't overload the system with that. And so with that said, what I will say is the only comparison we have for data to save, and the reason we're doing, let me go back and say the reason we're doing this project is to save money for Davie County schools in the long run. We did this in 2007 when we built Ellis Middle School. We installed a well, we were able to do it, and we have been irrigating 15 acres over there of athletic fields with an average yearly cost of $1,500 to $1,800 a year for power bill for this. Well, our water bill alone for Davie High School last year was $33,000 for just irrigating the fields. So we are irrigating 18 acres versus 15 acres, but I think you can just do the math roughly in your head that it's definitely in the long range the best way to go. And there's some well trucks. We contracted air drilling out of Statesville. They seem to have a lot of muscle, or a lot of knowledge in irrigation wells. They did William Ellis in 2007, and they just did a project for Iredell Statesville schools last year for that. And so, and as you can see, there's the tank, and it's got a secondary pump to regulate the water going to the heads. So, do you have any questions about that?
Dumb question. Tell me again with the two different wells. So when was you said first?
The first well was dug it was out of the 2019-20 budget year, so it was actually dug in the spring of this year.
Where is it?
It is on the right going down Little League Drive.
Okay.
It's directly behind that tank in that picture right there. It's directly on the other side of the road.
Gotcha. Okay.
Well, when we dug the second well, we need to be at least 300 feet apart. So we dug it back towards at the end of the discus throw on the North Davie side. And so we're actually in the process right now of digging the lines coming from North Davie and from that well back up to the main hub of where all this is going to stem from. And when we finish, we will fence all that in and secure it all up and everything. But we're in the process. We really can't do that yet until, of course, we get done with the project. Yes, on the irrigation side, not the potable water, but the irrigation side. Yes. Yes, we will run out of water. Yes, at the end of the day.
Unique story. Michael kept me posted on this. And I think we were sitting at 60 to 70 gallons a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Michael said I told him to go 20 or 40 more feet.
Yeah, 20 more feet to
He
make
said-
it even.
he said
500 feet or
He
whatever.
said go 20 more feet. We went from 60 to 70 gallons a minute to 200 gallons.
The next morning,
Which
he
is
said-
significant. And
Yeah.
that is huge for us. So it's his point. If we'd have hit that one first, we
We might not need
may not have needed the second.
but one. So at the end of the day, we thought we were going to have to set another 10,000 gallon tank and another. So we don't have to do that now. We can get it all out of that one. We put one 20 horsepower pump in that one. So
Great. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Last item is adjournment. Does anyone have any final comments besides please get out and vote? I think most of the county has voted, but
Recognition of Lori, and we've received emails about helping with food supply and giving of our time, and I know she's been committed to that and a lot of effort, and so thank you for doing that.
that's hard to believe. That's been a year. That's scary. Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion by Mr. Drexler, second by Ms. Smith. All in favor? Motion carries 7-0. We are now adjourned. Thank you. Have a great evening.